United States Olympic Committee, Development, Enhancement, and Sustainability of Expert Performance in Sport Conference, 2008, panel of experts discussion with Dick Schmidt, Mark Williams, Jim Bowman, Peter Vint, Anders Erickson, and Coach Hugh McCutcheon. The moderator for this event was Kathy Sellers. This was a Q&A session with the audience. First question by Kathy Sellers. Are repetitive sports different regarding training methods and feedback given than non-repetitive or team sports? Dr. Williams or Mark Williams suggests that closed skills may be random or variable practice. 2, because the environment changes. That is, wind, wet surfaces, crowd noise, etc. Dick Schmidt adds, the first time a repetitive skill is executed, the retrieval process must be used. And when basketballers shoot free throws, this same retrieval process would benefit random and variable training. First question from the audience. Should deliberate practice use variable, random practice, and should coaches give guidance to developing athletes for individual deliberate practice? Anders Erickson says many athletes can and do use a trial and error method to figure out what is effective, and generally evidence-based transfer is difficult to find regarding if practice method A is more effective than practice method B. Coach Hugh McCutcheon suggests deliberate practice can also be delivered as mindful repetition, so athletes are really paying attention and are aware plus focused on what they are doing instead of just going through the motions. Coach Hugh emphasizes working smart instead of hard and points out anyone can sweat, which implies exercising and or just moving body without much thought, just to sweat. Question number 2. How do we get athletes to self-monitor and or express the need for self-monitoring to this generation? Mark Williams says coaches can say to athletes, to get to the elite level, this must be done. That is, self-monitoring training logs and deliberate practice and play. Peter Vint says coaches can explain early on during the demonstration process that the answers will not always be given to elicit guided discovery and exploration and learning. Peter Vint goes on to say the coach should define expectations and standards early on so athlete understands self-evaluation, self-monitoring, and deliberate play are all a part of the process. Mark Williams agrees that coaches and clubs' expectation level is important and says Everton Football Club in England shows all new and prospective first-teamers the Everton way, which is a standard the players strive to get to be selected to the first team. This indoctrination is a part of the process of becoming Everton player. That is Everton. Just going to give a quick review and then explanation for the rest of the discussion. I led off with explaining this was a panel of the experts, basically a summary and or conclusion of all of the events and lectures that have happened with all of the speakers and or PhDs. For the most part, all of them are PhDs except for Coach Hugh McCutcheon, who was the Olympic coach for the women's Olympic champion team and the men's Olympic silver medalist team for volleyball. Much of the discussion is revolving around questions from the audience, so I'm not going to give necessarily any summary of their answers because those are their answers for the most part. I mean, those are their questions, and the authors and or the lecturers are giving specific answers to those questions. I'm going to refer back to the last portion regarding Everton Football Club, so the next line or two will reflect the previous question regarding Everton football. Everton FC shows ways and means of being an Everton player. Anders Erickson says he has not read many autobiographies or diaries of athletes that explains their process and how they planned, trained, performed. He then suggests this would be helpful for athletes and coaches if the elite athletes' training logs were available. As an example, Anders Erickson explained Wayne Gretzky spent hours a day from his youth to pros tracing the puck and anticipating the next move of play. This deliberate, intentional, non-coach practice likely helped Gretzky's game. He found that information out actually by reading, I think, Gretzky's autobiography and or biography. Coach Hugh McCutcheon explains that the coaches must get buy-in from the athletes before anything else. He then says all of the presenters have great ideas, but it's up to the coach to use this information effectively by getting buy-in from the athlete. Coach Hugh then suggests coaches must be the magic. That is, coaches must figure out what works best for them. Jim Bowman goes on to say he forces the issue with his athletes regarding expectations, structure, and organization by giving them forms to log and explain their process. He then asks them to create training logs to monitor their lives, that is, school, training, job, to help athletes help themselves understand what is going on from day to day, month to month, and year to year. That is, tracking their progress, development, and process. Peter Vint also says there's a little difference between practice performance and game day performance, then suggests practice performance may decrease when using random and variable practice methods, but learning will increase in game day performance too. He then suggests or references Coach Hugh McCutcheon and says buy-in from the athletes and parents is a must. Coach Hugh says coaches must believe what they're doing and be able to justify why they are doing it or using coaching methods, or parents will see right through them. He then says coaches could use methods described in this lectures or in these lectures which happen to be scientifically based, that is, evidence supported by sports science. Question number 3. How do coaches get buy-in? Coach Hugh explained to get buy-in, he would explain what the technical differences were, then explain how to correct the deficiencies with these methods. He also said getting good players to become better and the better to be the best in the world was his job, and when players know this, they may be willing to try new methods. Finally, Coach Hugh explained athletes must trust coaches, and this relationship fortifies buy-in. Dick Schmidt suggests he bases his beliefs on evidence and or scientific method that supports teaching and coaching styles. He later says if the evidence supports the change or new way or strategy, it likely is something he would encourage and suggested to the audience. They also use evidence for training, coaching styles, philosophies, and methods. Anders Ericsson said measuring effectiveness during training and competitions is imperative, and athletes will be able to see growth and development with accurate measures. These measurements many times are motivating and or let athletes see what they are improving on and need work on. Jim Bowman, a cognitive psychologist, said he regularly gives homework in between his sessions with athletes to help them monitor their stress levels. In this way, as in Anders Ericsson's suggestion, athletes will be able to see what level their stress is at and act accordingly. Question number 4. How is summary or bandwidth feedback used on experts? Dick Schmidt implies Peter Vint is right, suggesting that most, if not all, scientific and lab testing is done on college sophomores that support bandwidth and summary feedback. He goes on to say these tests are not done on experts in his experience, and there is very little literature to support bandwidth or summary feedback for experts. Mark Williams says experts may need even less feedback, and when they do receive feedback, it should be more precise, because most experts can process and determine what they did wrong and may only need feedback when they are unable to process, understand errors. Question number 5. What type of feedback is used for practice versus games? Coach Hughes said during practice, his teams vary throughout the year from sub-elite to elite, so different feedback must be given. He goes on to say for elites, he has them explain what they will work on before practice, which helps his coaches provide feedback during and after practice. For games, Coach Hughes says not much can be changed, so very technical language is used that may display or suggest or explain a lot of information in a few words. As an example, reach for the ball could mean position, shoulder, rotating around axis, and power execution. Mark Williams added, elite level coaches give brief technical and strategical feedback during games and not much if technical feedback. Dick Schmidt explained his lecture was not meant to be prescriptive and this is the right way, do it. Regarding summary feedback, he suggests coaches need to find out what works and what doesn't, or at least to begin to analyze, question, and think about their current feedback methods. Anders Ericsson expands on the summary feedback strategy and suggests after many repetitions, the coach will have more evidence to make a more robust assessment of skill. He also suggested expert athletes may need less feedback because they can analyze own skills better. Jim Bowman reminded everyone that feedback needs to be understood when given because a lot of athletes will shake their heads indicating they understand when they really do not understand the feedback. Dick Schmidt refers to Ericsson's use of term meta-knowledge and defines it as knowledge of knowledge, or knowing if you are assessing your ability, skill, technique accurately. He suggests if athletes' meta-knowledge is in error, so too will the athlete's evaluation of their own ability, skill, technique. Peter Vint, in response to a coach from audience, encourages coaches to get their athletes more involved with the process of learning to be successful when it counts. Question number 6. What are the alternatives to whole, part, whole method of teaching? Anders Ericsson responds saying elite level athletes focus on different things than novices and are in control of their environments, deliberately more so than the novices, who may be unaware of what they pay attention to. Dick Schmidt mentions Gabby Wolf in her book, Research for More Information on Attention and What People Pay Attention to. He also references Malcolm Gladwell and The Tipping Point, plus Gladwell's website for more information on articles about this subject. Mark Williams recommends that coaches interact with each other to see what works and find out what is most effective across all sports. He goes on to say most of the information that scientists presented is based on principles, and it's important for scientists plus coaches to interact also to see what works and what is most effective regarding practice, training, and coaching methods. Question number 7. How do you get athletes to change their technique? Olympic volleyball coach Hugh says one way is to appeal to the athletes objectively by showing them film and statistics of what accuracy or technical expertise looks like. He also explained volleyballers are motivated by money. If they change their technique, they are likely to earn professional contracts. Olympic coach Hugh said athletes change when they feel it's in their best interest and believe the change will help them. He ends the discussion about skill acquisition by saying, time is a coach's biggest enemy, which suggests there must be enough time to make effective changes, and there may not be enough time to attain certain techniques or skill. Both depend on how much time the coach has, according to Olympic coach Hugh. Question number 8. Can the 10 years of training or 10,000 hours of training to expertise be sped up and made more efficient? Olympic coach Hughes says the methodology the panel of experts has presented is supported by evidence and is the most efficient way to coach athletes. He also explained coaches are looking for efficiencies while coaching. Peter Vint, regarding the 10,000 hours to expertise, says much of the information in this lecture will help coaches and athletes learn more effectively if used versus not using the principles of guided discovery, random burst block practice, and effective feedback. That is, explicit versus implicit feedback. He goes on to say periodization has a natural progression with many of the concepts because of the format. That is, training cycles broken up into specific training periods that elicit varied types of coaching and training phases to enhance performance. Dick Schmidt suggests that focusing on the wrong things may inhibit performance and cites Gabby Wolf's research as an example. Anders Ericsson explains that science or scientists have different opinions on research suggesting scientists may interact the same data or interpret the same data differently. He believes elite performances can direct their attention appropriately, and this helps them perform at the elite level. Ericsson goes on to say standards and or measuring development are important, so there are clear benchmarks for getting to the elite level. He also points out newer disciplines may reach elite level sooner because they are new. He uses chess and music as older disciplines that take 15 to 25 years to become experts because there is a lot of competition. Standards exist, and most everyone is using the practices to attain elite levels, or most everyone is using best practices to attain elite levels. Finally, Erickson says, when everyone is using best practices, the time to expertise may be lengthened, and also the motivation to achieve and sustain excellence is ongoing. Plus, those who continue to improve consistently have an edge and an advantage. Coach or sports scientist from audience explains, each discipline of sport will require different lengths of time to expertise, which is determined by nature of sport. He used an example of sprinters, rowers, and shooters, suggesting that sprinters may be born with speed, whereas rowers may be born with higher endurance capacities, and shooters may need more time to master their sport due to other factors not necessarily acquired at birth. That is, they learned or had to learn more technique than a sprinter or a rower. Mark Williams says, no 2 hours of practice time are equivalent, suggesting coaches and athletes must make the most efficient use of training. He also states masters athletes who continue with deliberate practice continue to show improvements relative to their age groups into their 5th and 6th decades of life. Williams says the 10-year rule is not set in stone, and getting to elite levels in sport specific, which suggests it could take more time or less time than 10 years, depending on the culture and sport. He also says that the higher the technical ability of the sport, the sooner athletes need to begin deliberate practice, and using examples of rugby to suggest athletes who can run 100 meters in 10.5 seconds have a great athletic ability and can catch ball can start later as opposed to other more technical positions in football and rugby, like quarterback, or other technically demanding sports like soccer or figure skating or ballet or music. So that was the, conclusion of the USOC's Development Enhancement and Sustainability of Expert Performance in Sport, with the panel of experts with a Q&A session from the audience. And I don't know if it would make more sense to listen to this first or listen to this at the end, but definitely it would make sense to listen to this, in my opinion, 2 to 3 times. I've said this on some of the other audio notes. I actually listened to these things for about 6 or 7 years prior to actually taking notes on them, and, suggesting to myself that, this may be a good idea actually to provide to a lot of other coaches that want to expand their base of knowledge, share what they've learned, and then learn even more. Again, in my opinion, I suggest and I'm encouraging everyone to, try to expand their base of knowledge as much as they possibly can in an effort to enhance the coaching profession, and as a byproduct, give our athletes the best opportunity for success.